Hi, we've looked at setting up admin views, we've looked at creating fields for admin views, we've looked at setting up field types and how to use field types to create fields. Now we would like to look at setting the admin views to the component. Obviously the component itself has so much things that you can do. I'm going to try and deal with it a little at a time. So I'm first going to just look at adding the admin views to a component. Okay, so we'll go to components and we'll go to sim and distributor. And you would go to settings. Here you would see admin views. So to connect admin views to your component, you need to go to settings and open this button here. Usually when you start, it'll look like this. So very straightforward. You have a drop down here and you make a selection and then click next and you do the next one. And if you have a lot of admin views like I do here, you would type in the name of the admin view and there you have it. So I'm gonna type in the name here, sermon. Now these icons here, I've spoken about them previously. They are the icons from Joomla, which is called let me just look. Standard Ico Moon font. Okay, so it's this font here. Now, if you select an icon here, it'll show you that little icon, but only during the selection phase. So that is the icon that is going to be used for the view. Here in the right, you see this icon there. As we click through the component builder, it updates that icon. Okay, so this icon is what is being set here. Now you can select the icons to reflect to the admin view of your choice. Now we have a bunch of switches here and I'll look at them one at a time. Your admin menu is basically this menu. So the question is, do you want that view to show up next to your main view? That will be the first tick box. So we would say yes. Then, do you want to have an add record icon for this view? Now the add record icon, if you go to the dashboard, is this icon here. It's basically a shortcut to creating an admin view from the dashboard. So we would say yes. Then a dashboard list of records icon. So maybe you don't want this icon, just the add new, then you can tick that as no. But again, here we would like yes. Then a sub menu. Now the sub menu, if you've opened your view, it has a sub menu here that can collapse away. Now this sub menu is, you can add this view to the sub menu or not. Then auto checking is a little tweak that I've added to my Joomla components, and I'm possibly gonna make a pull request to add it to Joomla itself. What auto check-in does is it adds a feature to your component. Since you see, I had clients that complained that some people will open an item and then in the browser click back instead of clicking close, and that will keep the item logged out to that individual, and so others cannot access it unless they have admin rights to check it back in. So we created an auto check-in. Now auto check-in checks whether this item has been checked out longer than a set period, and if it has been, it checks it in automatically. Now that set period is something that the administrator sets in the global settings of the component. I'll show you that later. Just that you know, you can add auto check-in to a view by either saying yes or no here. Then keeping history of a backend view. Now, the history component, I must tell you, is maybe one of the most exciting things that I could integrate. You see, what it does is it keeps track of every change you make in any article or any item in your application. So, for example, if I was to go to, let's just look here just a moment, to a preacher, and I would open up this a cappella music, you'd see that it has that version button here at the top. Now, if I was gonna make a change here, let's say I typed in info@vdm and I said some text here and I clicked save, and then I clicked on version, you'd see that it's now logged a new version, and there are the old ones. And I could click on one of the old ones and click well, first let me say I could take the one I'm on currently and I could say keep, and that would sort of lock it in, because you can also set how long amount of history should the system keep. The default is 10 changes. So I could click on the previous version and say restore, and this will restore it, and you see there email address is gone and this description is gone. If I want to go back to the one I've done, I could just click on version again and click there and also restore, and now we would see, wow, that detail is also back again. That is the feature of history. Now, the history component is actually a Joomla extension, which you're able as a application component developer integrate into your own components, and it's not that easy. In fact, it's maybe very difficult. If I was to show you the amount of code, in fact, let me do that, that you need to write. First of all, you need to add an asset ID to all your backend view database tables. So if we were to go to Summon Distributor and check out, wait, this is the front end, let's go to the back end, and we check out its SQL table, so we'll click on that. You'd see that all of them have asset IDs. Now, that is really not as easy as it is. Once you've got the asset ID, then in your model, when you basically save, sorry, not in the model, I think it's in the table. When you start your table, you should set up observers that check this specific item to add history options to that asset ID. So this is part of the whole part of the script that is being added. This is being added on the right place, as well as in the store method. There is another tweak which it might take too long to look at all of that. We'll go into more detail in the advanced courses, I suppose. But just that you know, I created an import-export method, and even in the import and export of data, actually primarily in the importing of data, you need to again do a quite advanced trick to ensure that the history of that item will be tracked. And these kind of features are just added dynamically to your component because of that switch. Now, that's not the only code. The code that really throws people out, I suppose, is this script code. And this is the script that is used when the component installs. So if you look at this is the uninstall area in the script code, which runs when you uninstall the component. And it's looking in many places. It's looking in content type, it's looking in the content tag map, it's looking in the UCM base, it's looking in the content types again, and per view. I mean, this is not just once off. It's per view these checks are done, and we are removing any items that might remain there. Because when you uninstall a component, what you don't realize is it's so integrated into the Joomla system that just removing its own tables actually doesn't do the job. So we added the feature that if you uninstall, it actually cleans the Joomla system of that extension completely, which is ideal because you won't want any traces left. You would like to uninstall something, you want it gone. And so this uninstall method does exactly that. And then with the installing of this component, we get here, which is the post-flight install, we actually add many records to areas inside of Joomla. So for example, inside of the, let me see, the contents type, we need to add this information, and we have to do it for every view which you've selected, either tags or history. We'll look at the tags and the category concept just a little bit later, just that you get a heads up, and I realize this is not the place for it, but let me just say we will look at that. Okay, so let me continue. Okay, content types, as you see, we're adding it for the sermons, we're adding it for the series, we're adding it for the statistics and for the help documents. And that is when we install the component. We needed to add, now you're not seeing the whole picture, let me scroll a bit, look at that string that needs to be written and added to the database of these specific areas to create that integration where it will track the object change and just do it automatically. So all this is generated by Component Builder. And then when you do an update, now here's the issue. When you do an update and you're adding a new field to a view, this update will make sure that that specific field also will get tracked. So what it first does is it gets the data, it tries to see whether it already exists. If it exists, I mean it's here, it just updates it. If it's been for some reason removed, it inserts it. So that is the update method. The update method also takes care of a lot of discrepancies, because as you develop your extension, now there's two phases to development. The one phase is when you're busy building it and no one else in the world has it. And that's a very easy phase, and in fact then you don't really use this nice feature. You just uninstall it and reinstall it every time until you're happy with what you see. But then once you put it out in the public, you can't just step up your database structure without the needed scripting for others to do an easy upgrade, because they already got data in their database. They can't just uninstall and install. That's ridiculous. Now Component Builder has a way for you to actually address that. Well, obviously because I had to deal with it and I don't want to have my clients complain. So I added a feature which we'll look at. It's inside of Component Builder's component area. And I'll explain it in detail. But just that you know, this part of the update feature, making use of your specific integration to keep track of your backend view changes to items, is in place already. Written by Component Builder, telling you here on which line it was done if you have that switch tripped. Okay, so that is just giving you a quick glimpse into the code of a little switch. A little switch called Keep History. So this little switch does all that for you for this specific view. Then, depending on whether you're going to use this view's information on the front end as your main base for your page, you might want to add metadata. Now metadata, as I know, isn't that useful anymore, but you know what? Although Google and others are maybe ignoring it, it still plays a role to making a page very search engine optimized. Now Component Builder, if you do your homework and you do things right in relationship to implementation of your metadata, you would see that it actually adds tremendous good features to your front end of your site. So I would suggest that you add metadata when you are going to use a specific area to the front. And when we start looking at setting up the site views, you'll see this coming up again and the necessity of using it. Obviously, you'll be remodeling the data because you can get relationship from many databases, but you need the area in the back end to get the data, right? Okay, then this access switch might throw you out. This simply adds the following feature. If you open an article and open publish, it says here access public super registered, which is relating to your user let me just close this, your user access levels. And as you know, user access levels can target multiple groups into one user access level. And so this again is only a feature that will really be extremely useful when you look at your front end of your component. In the back end, you can also make use of it, of course. You can change the access of a specific item, but since we also have such a intense permissional switches, I hardly ever make use of it, but it's there, and I mostly use it for front end when I want a certain area in the front, or sorry, certain item not to be accessible to the front. Okay, then do you want to add the import export function? Again, this is an extended area which Component Builder dynamically just adds. So you don't need to do anything as to relation to scripting at this stage. You can just click yes or no to import export feature at the top of the page of every view. So every view will have an import export. At the moment, it's a direct relationship import export. What I mean by that is you need to follow, if you export this, then you would see the way it should look to do an import. And the import is really nice. You can map the headers to the specific database tables. Obviously, there's work needed, especially when you're dealing with information that was encrypted. If you export it, it will decrypt it if you have the permissions to access that item, of course. But the problem is, because it's decrypting it, when you import it, it doesn't know that it should encrypt it. So there is a little discrepancy with the advanced storing methods. So as long as you are having a backend database table that actually doesn't require these advanced storing methods, it's just your normal defaults like we explained before, the import-export method will then work seemingly without any problems. So I'm still working on this area, but it's already working well enough that I felt I could leave it in there. Okay, that is this switch here. And obviously, if you don't like the feature, just click no. Then here is a feature which I think I'm most excited about, and that is every backend view has, of course, an edit area, right? If you've selected that read-write option, then the edit area, you can change the values of that backend list view, right? So the admin create site view means that the system is going to dynamically build the front area which you can access to edit the data at the front of the website. Now, Yahoo, this is or Hooray or whatever, that's an excellent tool. So it takes exactly this. If I was to use this as an example, it takes this editing area and place it on the front of your website. Now, obviously, you are controlling in the permissional structures who has access to edit this, who has access to edit this, the status, who has access to edit specific fields. We looked at adding the fields to your admin views, and you could tick whether this field should have permissional structure. Now, that means that if you have those things set up in the back in the global permissional tab, then it will be implemented in the front. If a certain user is in the correct group, they won't be able to access this. And if they have access, but they don't have the right to, for example, update maybe the modified date or the status, then in the front they also will not be able to do that. So you have immense control over who can do what, but at the same time you have the ability to actually edit items on the front. I think that is excellent to be able to do that, and that all of that just possible by saying yes. But realize this: the fact that it creates the the view, if I could say so, and places it on the front, doesn't mean that there is a link somewhere to it. That is something you'll need to add to your site, front custom site, as you develop it. And this is partly a feature, therefore, which if you don't know PHP and if you're not that familiar with how to set up your links on the front of a component, you possibly would find this difficult to implement. But I will show you what it builds. In fact, I can show you that now. I have a component in which I'm using that feature quite a lot, and it's called cost benefit projection. This is the back end, and so if we look at the views, we have here called company, and we have one called scaling factor and intervention. Now these are editing views, as you can see. Those are the list views, those are the editing views. Now if I go to the front of the website and I open that component and I click on view, you see that there is company, there is intervention, and there is scaling factors, and they are basically being extended here. So what the component builder does is it adds this view, it also adds the module for it, and it also adds the controller for it. So basically it puts all the script in place so that all you need to do is inside of, for example, I have here an area called cPanel. Now let me show you this component briefly. Okay, so this is just some dummy data that I've placed in here. None of it is real. And so here you can open multiple items, and this is all some stuff that I built in Component. In fact, none of this was built outside of Component Builder. It all was done in Component Builder. And you can click on Edit Advanced Profile, and it will open the editing area, as you can see. And now this is the back-end editing area of that. Now let me show you, sorry, this is the front-end editing area. And as you can see, there are all the tabs. Now let me show you the back-end. So here's the back-end area. So it's basically showing up the same information in the front. It only dumps the permission and the publishing features, but that is because of access permissions. It's done automatically because that front-end user didn't have permissions to edit things, most of the things in here. In fact, it didn't have the right to edit any of these. Therefore, it didn't need to see it, and so the system just removed that tab. Same goes with the permissions. And if you didn't have the right to do scaling factors or interventions, it'll also have dumped that. It won't show it up in the front. And so this is the back end of that same dummy company that I've set up. And you can see that it basically moved it to the front. Not only did it make it possible to edit data, but also to create new companies. So if you click on that, you see it opens up an area for you to start fresh. So you can create a company from scratch. Now, in this specific example, you see that you cannot actually add a user. So what the system has done through some custom scripting that I've added, if you click save, it adds his ID in here, and he doesn't need to select that. Okay, so that's just a quick look at that specific button called Edit Create Site View. It adds that whole code base to the front and integrates it to the way that the front needs to be able to control the permissions. Then the order of the items are simply the way in which it will be displayed anywhere. So if we think about the order for a moment here of, for example, Component Builder, the order of which these icons are laid out, and even if you opened one of them, the order in which this is done and also for the submenu. All of that is controlled with this order number here. Okay, so that's a quick look at adding admin views to your component. I hope that is insightful enough for you to understand how to do that. If you have any questions, please, you're welcome to send me a mail. Thanks for watching.